It's a pleasure to be here today. I'd certainly like to thank David and the ITF for inviting me here to share some really great memories I have. I had the pleasure and the real privilege of being the U.S. Davis Cup captain for 6 years, from 1994 through 1999. And we won the Davis Cup in '95, and we lost in the finals to Sweden in 1997. And as you can see by this first slide, clearly, without any talented players, it's really all about coaching. Just kidding. Okay, we had from left to right, Richie Renenberg, top 30 in singles throughout his whole career, #1 in doubles. Jim Courier, who's currently our U.S. Davis Cup captain, 4 Grand Slam titles, 3 times runner-up, and he helped the U.S. win the Davis Cup twice, 92 and 95. The bald guy, who used to have a lot of hair, Andre Agassi, 8-time Grand Slam champion. He won all 4 slams. He won the Olympic gold medal in Atlanta in 1995, and I had the privilege, or 1996. I had the privilege of being the Olympic coach in '96 when he won the gold medal. And then a guy who was pretty good, Pete Sampras, my late twin brother Tim, coached him for 5 years, and he only won 14 slams, and he helped us win the Davis Cup twice. And then Todd Martin. Todd went to college for 2 years. He went to Northwestern in Chicago for 2 years. And then he got up to a career high of #4 in the world, finalist in Australia, losing to Sampras, finalist at the U.S. Open, losing to Andre Agassi after being up 2-1. So for 6 years, I had the privilege of having an unbelievable laboratory, a live laboratory of working really with the best players in the world. And for those of us who have coached teams, junior teams, teams at a club, I had a very big challenge as Davis Cup captain when I'm coaching these people who all were competing for Grand Slam titles. So how do you take people like that and in a 1-week period of Davis Cup kind of create some kind of a team environment? And, the one thing I learned very quickly was everybody's different. They're all great players. They all have different game styles. They all have different personalities. They all have different ways of the way they like to practice and prepare for their match. And they certainly all had, different kind of mentalities on the court. So, and they all had one thing in common. They were all great players and Grand Slam champions. So, one of the things about those guys is they're all within about a year or two of their age. And, well, here's a clip of a pretty good player, Michael Chang, who wasn't in our winning team in Moscow. Young Michael, won the French Open here when he was 17. And this is the famous underhand serve. He's playing Ivan Lendl in the semis here, who was a pretty good player. Now he's a pretty good coach. I know the Brits love him because he helped Murray win a Grand Slam. And with the French reaction here. He was cramping, so he goes to the underhand serve. All right, Michael Chang, one of our first great American champions. He won that tournament. He won the French Open when he was 17. And another great champion, Mats Wilander, also won the French Open when he was 17. And so Michael Chang here was a counterpuncher. He was a counterpuncher. You know, he was one of the few guys that I had that didn't have a real dictating style of play. So he had, as a counterpuncher, you know, some qualities that probably the number one quality is guts. I mean, in all the research that's been done about success in any venue, the number one quality for success is perseverance and tenacity and just kind of sticking to it. Like Nadal says in his book, which is a great read, he said, I just try to get a little bit better every day. And just think, if you just try to get a little bit better every day as a tennis player, as an athlete, and as a competitor, you know, how much better you're going to be at the end of 1 year, at the end of 2 years. So Chang, you know, as a counterpuncher, you know, one of the biggest skills you need to develop in your players if you have counterpunchers is awareness. I think you look at all the great players playing the game today, they all have a great deal of awareness in two phases. One, kind of self-awareness. Oh, I've missed 5 first serves in a row into the tape. What's my adjustment for getting the serve over? Maybe I use my legs a little more. Maybe I put a little spin on the ball to put a little more cover. You know, the first type of awareness is just self-awareness, how to adjust your own game. And then the second type of awareness that he had, which kind of relates to how you read the game, you know, you kind of, you know, eyes and mind are the first way of reading the game. And, you know, reading your opponent, okay? So, you know, Michael, you know, really had that in spades. He anticipated very well, and he could really read the game well. And then he was a terrific counterpuncher. He loved to target. So, and then obviously he was incredibly determined. The year he lost in the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open, he was a number 2 seed, and he lost to Patrick Rafter, the great serve and volleyer from Australia. I know that's an extinct game style now, but it sure was fun to watch, you know, when Patrick, you know, played serve and volley. And his coach and his brother, Carl Chang, sat in that stadium at the U.S. Open for like 4 hours after the match and didn't move, because he really thought this was Michael's year to win the U.S. Open and kind of get that mantra of, oh, he's a one slam wonder, you know, he's only going to win 1 slam, kind of like Roddick a little bit. And 2 weeks later, we're playing Australia in the semis of the Davis Cup in Washington, D.C. And Michael, you know, being a really big student of the game, the week of Davis Cup, I sat with Michael and his father, Joe, and his coach, Carl, and his brother, and we watched tapes, as painful as it was for him to watch that quarterfinal match of the U.S. Open over again, because he had to play Rafter in the first match of Davis Cup. And he made a couple adjustments which were really crucial. And I'll just point them out here. You know, basically Rafter was serving and volleying first and second serves. And I really felt in that match, especially on the second serve, Michael's court position was still a little too far back, and that kick serve is getting up too high, and he was getting outside the court too much. So I said, you know, he's serving volleying first and second serve, you've got to take time away. So one of the adjustments that we made for that particular Davis Cup tie, our match was the first match, as I said, when he misses his first serve, stand inside the court and try to take that return about 2 steps earlier. That'll take him 2 steps less of getting into the net. So he's going to hit his first volley. Instead of hitting his first volley, from in here somewhere in really good position, he's now playing the first volley, maybe 2 steps back. So he's going to play more of a lower volley. And he also can't get into court position to really cover the second shot as effectively. So just by making that one adjustment of taking the second serve 2 steps earlier and really committing to that, Michael, won that first match against Rafter in 4 sets, and that helped lead us to a victory. So Michael, amazing. And one of the things also that Michael did in his drive to get better was he was the first one. This racket is 27 inches. And remember when Prince made that racket that was 2 inches longer? The 29-inch, Michael, he wanted, in tennis, you always want what you don't have. If you're slow, you want to be fast. If you serve, big, you want to be a better mover. And Chang was trying to upgrade his game, so he was trying to serve bigger and trying to hit the ball harder, and he really kind of lost his identity as a player. What made him good, the players used to call Michael the everywhere man, because everywhere you hit the ball, here's Chang standing there loaded up behind the ball and playing the shot, so everywhere you would hit the ball, he would be there. So when you're playing someone who moves well, all of a sudden you try to hit the ball harder, you try to hit the ball, instead of a target being here, you try to play the ball closer to the line. So Michael really used his speed and his anticipation and his tenacity as a weapon against players, and they would try for too much because the players would get frustrated because every time he was there, he would be everywhere they hit the ball, he would be able to counter. Okay, Jim Courier, Captain Courier. Here he is. A pretty good moment for him, beating Andre Agassi in the finals of the French for his first slam.
That's too good. It's lovely, this by-play between Courier and Higueras and Stan Smith. Oh, what a way to win it. What a way to win it for Jim Courier. The 20-year-old becomes a Grand Slam champion. Terrific contest.
Who's that guy with hair right there? I don't know. Okay, great moment for Courier. Just one quick story about that match. Jose Higueras, who's our director of coaching for the USTA and obviously a great coach, made an unbelievable adjustment during a rain delay. The whole idea for Jim playing against Agassi was to take control of the points, because one thing Agassi did better than anyone in the world, maybe in the history of the game, was Andre would stand in the middle of the court, kind of cheating a little bit here, and just control everybody with his forehand and backhand. And most of the time, his opponents would run twice as much as he would. He was unbelievable at controlling the middle of the court. Great hands, great movement. And Courier was going to take the second serve early and rip it and try to get him on the defense on the first ball. And Jim was down 6-2, 3-love, and Agassi, had a pretty good kick. And what was happening, Courier wasn't timing the ball properly, and he was mishitting a lot of returns. He had that, he and Roddick had that same backhand where they had 2 stiff arms, which isn't highly recommended technique. And he would kind of muscle it, kind of a baseball swing, and he would mishit it, and then he'd be inside the court, and Agassi's got a short ball. So he was going anywhere he wanted. So on the rain delay, Jose said to Courier, okay, your timing on the return of the second serve isn't good. So why don't we do this? Why don't we back up behind the baseline, and like a lot of clay court players do, they take the ball on the fall. The ball gets up to the peak. You know, they get a lot of time to measure it and see it, and they rip a high, heavy, deep, and then get back up on the baseline and start to look for a short ball where you could dictate. Okay, that was the one adjustment they made. And while Jose was sitting in the locker room of the French making this really terrific adjustment with Courier, Nick Bollettieri, Agassi's coach, was doing interviews with the media, you know, and obviously he didn't talk to Andre, and Jim went on to win that match in 4 sets, and Jim is such a great competitor. Anyway, here he is again. This is another quick Courier story here. Playing Marat Safin, the young Marat Safin from Russia, in the 5th match of our Davis Cup tie in Atlanta, Georgia. Tell you a funny story about this match. Okay. You know, as a captain of the Davis Cup, you're always trying to get your matchups and say, is this going to be a point for me or a point for the other side? And on paper, that was Marat Safin's first Davis Cup tie. He was 18 years old. And in his first match, Agassi beat him in straight sets, like a drum. You know, he made like 60 on 4 stairs, and he was very nervous. And then we beat them in the doubles. Todd Martin and Richie Renenberg beat Kafelnikov, who was a great doubles player, and Safin. And at that point, you know, young Mr. Safin was only 18 years old, and the way he would volley at the net in doubles is he would always volley like backing up. So in our doubles match, we isolated, you know, Safin, and once the ball was in play, we just hit every ball to Safin, and he completely fell apart, which was very nice for us as a team. So the 5th match, I'm thinking, okay, I've got Courier, a Davis Cup veteran, you know, former world #1, playing against Safin, this complete rookie. And I liked that matchup, especially the way he had played against Agassi, and then again the way he had played in the doubles. Okay, we're trying to get a little better mood here, or what? But where's the music? Huh? But you know, so, and Courier and I had a great relationship. I actually helped set him up with Jose Higueras when he wanted to be part of our USTA program. So Jim and I were very close. I'd started helping Jim when he was 16 years old. So we had a very good coach-player relationship. And so, you know, Jim's a pretty macho guy. And, you know, he's down 6-0, 4-1, 2 service breaks. And he comes and he sits down next to me in the chair, and he says, Gully, what can I do against this guy? And I said, Jim, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked, because that gave me the opening to help change his tactic. I said, well, let me see. This guy is Safin. He's 6'4", big guy, serving harder than you, hitting his forehand harder than you, hitting his backhand harder than you, and you've won 1 game out of 11. So obviously standing on the baseline and trying to out-macho this guy, you know, is not working. So I said, what you need to do is when the ball comes to your backhand, instead of doing this one, as you see on the screen there, that one, which was a little bit ugly even on his best day, you know, cock the wrist up, go to that good slice. Keep the ball low. make Safin bend, make him hit up a little bit. And yeah, then obviously when you get your forehand, that's your signature shot. You've got to go for the forehand. That way you change the rhythm of the points. You change the speed of the ball, you change the rhythm, which is always a good thing to do, especially against a big hitter. So Jim says, okay, great. So he goes out the next game, Safin serving. Every time he gets a backhand, he slices. Safin's got a low forehand. He doesn't get it up and down, hits it long. Great. Jim kind of looks over at me and nods. And then he hit a really short slice that forced Safin to come in the net. And he comes up to the net, and Jim hits the passing shot right at him, hits a backhand volley like in the bottom of the net like that. And Jim kind of looks over at me, and he goes like this. And he breaks serve, and he holds. So now we're only down 4-3, one break still. And he sits down next to me, and he says, "Golly, I think we're on to something. I think that's going to work." And I said, "Well, just keep it up. Keep it up. I think you're doing fine. But I have to ask you, Jim, what was this? What was this? What does that mean, that sign you gave me?" He goes, "You're absolutely right. He's a complete bluff at the net, this guy. He's a pair of twos at the net." And so we ended up winning that match in, I think, 5 sets. Jim beat him in 5 sets. But the whole match, every time Safin would miss a volley, wherever Jim was on the court, he'd be walking back to the baseline. He'd go, he flashed the pair of twos sign the whole match. So as you can see, even in the pressure of a 5th match in Davis Cup, we were able to have a little fun with it. And Jim would make any adjustment. One of the things that all great players have is they're incredibly stubborn, all right? But Jim would do he was such a warrior, he was such a competitor, he would do anything he could to win the match. It wasn't below his pride level to change his game. All right. We can go. And obviously, he was a competitor, and he was obviously a warrior. The warrior status, to me, when I picked him to be on my Davis Cup team, I knew for 100% sure the 2 weeks before Davis Cup, he was doing 2-a-day practices. He'd do 2-on-1s for 2 hours in the morning, and then he would typically, in the afternoon, play 3 sets, and then he would go to the gym and kill himself in fitness. And I knew he was doing that for 2 straight weeks before the Davis Cup week. So he was such a great warrior, such a great competitor, and that's why he's such a great captain. And I know he's helped John Isner a ton for the U.S. to win 2 away ties on red clay against Switzerland, against France, and then unfortunately going down against Spain. Jim is going to be an excellent captain because he gets it, and at a certain level, one of the things in U.S. tennis is that, I would tell the girl, I worked with the girls on the tour, the young American girls, for the last 2 years, and I said, "Girls, we're not playing ball striking. We're playing tennis, okay?" And as my brother told Pete Sampras, "Hey, Pete, take that little Palos Verdes white collar off, put your blue collar on, and go to work. To beat somebody, to win a match, it's not all about, oh, I've got my A game and I'm hitting the ball perfectly and I'm timing the ball well. It's about being an athlete and being a competitor." And I think Jim was the ultimate competitor.